Okay, I'm going to be recapping the on your own lesson that we did at the beginning of the semester. And just one of the videos we watched was about cultural mapping. Cultural mapping was a term coined by Erin Meyer. She's a professor at INSEAD, one of the world's leading national or international business schools in France. She's the author of The Culture Map, and her her word culture mapping um, is kind of a list of scales of how cultures interact with each other. So during this review, I'll be talking about low versus high context communication, direct versus indirect negative feedback, and comfort with silence. First of all, the difference between high context cultures and low context cultures. Um, High context means that in communication, people assume that they're coming from a lot of common reference points. So they infer a lot of things in their conversation and don't always tell it exactly how it is, like in low context cultures. Some high context cultures are can be found in China, Korea, Saudi Arabia, etc. Low context cultures are ones like those found in the US, in the UK, Canada, etc. Um, and that is kind of the opposite. We assume that we have very few common reference points, and so we explain things, we delineate them, say exactly what we mean. And in Erin's words, we like if we were giving a presentation, we would lay out exactly what we were going to say, we would say what we're going to say, and then we would recap what we say. And then the next day we'd get a memo about what was said. So that is low context versus high context. Next is direct negative feedback versus indirect negative feedback. Direct negative feedback is found in cultures like in France, Italy, Germany, those that seem a little more gruff, a little harder to deal with to us because they give feedback very directly, meaning they say things how it is. If you're doing something wrong, they say, fix this. They don't sugarcoat it. On the other hand, in places like Mexico, China, India, that are much more used to indirect negative feedback, they sugarcoat the things that are going wrong with compliments and listing things that are also going right. Third is comfort with silence. In some cultures with high comfort with silence are Japan, Korea, Indonesia, etc. And some with low comfort with silence are the US, UK, Australia. And what that looks like in conversation is in cultures with low comfort with silence, they tend to talk over each other. So like you'll see this a lot in Hispanic cultures where they tend to start their sentence before the other person is done, and they just never want there to be silence, and that is why. Right in the middle of the comfort zone, we have what Erin calls perfect timing cultures, where you say person A will say their sentence, then as soon as they're done talking, person B will start. And while there's no silence between, there's also no overlapping. And lastly, in cultures with high comfort with silence, you'll often find that when person A is finished speaking, person B pauses before responding or beginning their thought. And that can be really uncomfortable for people in cultures with low comfort with silence.